with the TRX. Now, I've had many people in the past ask me, hey man, could you put something up a little more basic, because some of the stuff you're doing is a little too advanced for me, and I'd like to know what we could do as a regression to what you've been doing already, so then eventually we can start instituting the other TRX workouts that you've put up in the past. So this is going to be more for you beginners out there, and I hope you guys like it. For the first exercise, we're going to be coming back here into a row. This is an exercise I see done very often, very commonly with the TRX. The problem is there's a lot of biomechanical deficiencies that most trainers and other practitioners out there don't cover, and I'm hoping to give you guys a little more clarity on that with this video. So the basic thing that we have to start focusing on is obviously leaning back. We're going to be leaning back off the TRX, and from there what I want you thinking of is immediately that you're trying to create 90-degree angles. So if you look at the relationship from my arms to my torso, you're going to see about a 90-degree angle created there. If I start going here, you're going to see that angle shorten significantly. So if that angle shortens, it severely inhibits how much range of motion I can get with my upper body. But if I create a 90-degree angle, that's going to enable me to use my lats much more effectively. So we want to make sure that we keep that intact. We want to lead with our scapula before we start leading with the arms. Most of the time when people do a row, they'll oftentimes pull with the arms, instituting more bicep contraction. If you stimulate the biceps too much, like doing movement, that has attachment points in the same places as part of your pecs, which can then lead to further rounding of your posture. So we don't want to do anything that may begin to ingrain more dysfunction directly within that. So we want to ensure that we pull from the scapula first. So as I come back, I go here, I institute the connection from the scapula, then I start bending the arms and I continue with the pull coming from the scapula as I get to the top. Breathing should be sequenced. As I come up, I inhale. That way I get the thoracic spine engaged with the diaphragm. Then I exhale. Another thing we want to look at is the angle in relation of the forearm to the TRX. So as I come down and come back in this direction, if I start pulling like this, which I see out of most people when they do TRX rows, what's happening again is an overusage of those biceps, and you'll also see my upper traps begin to take in a lot of load while I'm doing this exercise. So I want you to do instead, you're going to stay a little bit lower. Keep your hands a little lower. Think about keeping the forearms aligned with that TRX. So I'm creating an angle that's completely in line with this suspension system, and that I'm not bending the elbow too much, because that's again going to institute more activation of the bicep, and we really don't need that. Okay, for the next exercise that we're going to be covering is just a squat. So this is the squat with the TRX is a great way to get somebody started. Like if somebody has no clue how to utilize their pelvic systems in terms of like their posterior chain, like hamstrings and glutes, this can be a very useful technique. So as I'm going with the squat, with the normal one, what people generally tend to want to do is when they come for the squat, they'll tend to want to shear and drive their knees forward as they go into the squat. The beauty of a TRX is that when you kind of suspend yourself here, is that it takes away that need to want to go that way. And most of the time when I get somebody to do a squat on a TRX, what they'll actually do is they'll sit back a lot further. So at that point, we're kind of training an opposite extreme. So like when people do a regular squat, they'll generally want to dip downward. So what we can do is give them support to train them in the opposite extreme. So then when they go down into a regular squat with no support, hopefully they'll fall somewhere in the middle, and it makes it much easier for them to transition into a squat. So again, just with the squat, all we're doing, we're making sure that there's no movement of the knees coming anteriorly or posteriorly. So try not to scoot your knees back as you come down. They pretty much just kind of just swivel like a hinge. They go here, we hinge, we drop the navel in, we drop the tailbone back, we come up, and we finish out that squat. We come down, keeping the navel in, we come up, finish out that squat. After you've gotten that basic movement down, what we can then do is go into a single leg squat. So I'll be coming from here, dropping back and down into this position, then I'll come right back up. Initially what I'll have somebody do is just barely tap their foot on the ground, then I'll have them come back up. Once you get more advanced, what you can then do is begin to hinge the hips on your own. Don't even put that foot on the ground. Be sure to not let your hips kind of sway over to the side, to not shoot over to the side. Try keeping that navel in, keep that transverse abdominis engaged to stabilize the spine and that overall lumbopelvic region. So we keep that in place. And we really try leading with those glutes and hamstrings. If you're not feeling like a tug on the hamstrings at the bottom phase, and then an activation of your glute at the top phase of the movement. So on your eccentric, you should feel the hamstrings working. As on the concentric, you should feel the glutes working. If we're not building that connection, we're going to have some major problems because you're likely going to start overutilizing the quadriceps. I'll do the other side next. I come down for a single leg squat, and then I come up, rotate the pelvis under. So I tuck that hip back, or I drop the tailbone back, go into pelvic flexion, keeping the spine neutral. Then I'll come up. And again, this is just here as support. So the less I use it, probably the better. Also realize that the less you use this, the more your knee's gonna tend to wanna come forward in compensation, which is okay. As long as you're not going too far, you're gonna be fine. Right there, I'm feeling a really, really huge burn out of my right glute there. If I give you guys an anterior view of this same exercise, what I also want you to be wary of is lateral patellar tracking as you're coming back and forth. So as you're coming down for that squat maneuver, try ensuring that that does not rotate in and outward, or that it doesn't lean in and outward. If that is happening, it's more than likely a result of poor intrinsic core stabilization, which means that you're probably not activating your transverse abdominis and your thoracic spine and your hamstring muscles very well as you're getting to the bottom. So oftentimes what your body will then do is it'll kind of like kink out to one side, and then next thing you know, that knee will start buckling inward. So if you haven't addressed your posture, that might be something that you want to do so prior to doing something like this. Because even though this is a very basic exercise, if it's done with improper execution, it's likely it could lead to injury. So what we're going to be looking at as I come down is there's just no movement happening in that knee in terms of lateral kinetics. So there's no movement happening side to side. If you do not move the knee side to side and you're able to get the hinge maneuvers happening properly with good spinal stability, it is highly likely that you're going to feel a good burn in the hamstrings and the gluteus maximus, and you shouldn't feel too much happening in the quadriceps. And you should also feel like very, very strong after that, because we're now starting to institute musculature that's much